So welcome everybody. I'm Britin Bostick, the Downtown and Historic Planner for the City of Georgetown. I'm the Britin of this webinar, and then joining me is Ann Evans, the reference librarian for the award-winning Georgetown Public Library. We are so excited to get to celebrate Black History Month. Black History Month is celebrated every February, and as we kick off the month, we had a really incredible opportunity to interview a very wonderful, valued resident in Georgetown and a longtime resident of our Track-Ridge-Grasshopper neighborhood, which is historically African-American neighborhood in Georgetown. And so we're really looking forward to Paulette Taylor sharing some stories with you. As we get started, though, we want to make sure that you know what is happening in Georgetown to celebrate Black History Month. And so the GCCMA does a lot of work around celebrating Black history in Georgetown. And so if you're not familiar with them, that's the Georgetown Cultural Citizen Memorial Association. Regina Durden is the event organizer this year for Black History Month. And so there are 3 really important events that are happening. What's great is these are virtual, so you'd be able to participate from home. And the first event that we want to highlight is, and we're so excited about this opportunity, Officer Jolly earns her badge. Georgetown Police Officer Delta Jolly has written and published a fantastic children's book, and she'll be reading this book live. So if you go to gccmatx.org, you'll be able to see information about that event, how you can join, and then that's just going to be a really great activity. So that's co-sponsored by the Williamson Museum and also the Lone Star chapter of the Links Incorporated. And we hope that you're able to join for Officer Jolly reading her book. It's a really excellent children's book, but also kind of a great salute to the work that Officer Jolly does in our community and sharing her story. So we want to make sure everybody knows about that. It's happening on February 6th from 11 a.m. to noon. So if you have kids or know kids who might want to see that story time, we definitely want to see that story time, then please join for that. And moving up in the age group, they also have a program called The Key, Money Choices for Teens, and that's going to be taught by Marjorie Anderson. That'll be on February 13th, also from 11 a.m. to noon. And that's for teens and their parents, and that's going to be expert advice on keys to financial management. So if you're interested in that or know someone in that teenage age group that might benefit from that information, you can again go to gccmatx.org and find out more information and how to register. And then toward the end of the month, Dr. Swain is going to be talking about the bridge and pursuing God's heart for racial reconciliation. And so I've had the opportunity to do some work with Dr. Swain and really appreciate the wisdom, insight, and just wonderful kind of expression of kind of thoughtful approaches to relationships that he really is able to successfully share. And he is a great person to be in a meeting with. And I really value that relationship with him. And so if you're interested in that event or would like to learn more, check out GCCMA's website, gccmatx.org, and you can find out more information. We'll have our contact information at the end, so in case you need to call or email us, we'd be glad to help get you connected to that organization. Also, the Williamson Museum is hosting some great Black History Month events, not just for Georgetown, but for Williamson County. So if you're interested in Taylor and Hutto-based Black history information and events, please connect with the Williamson Museum also to learn more about that and participate in some of what they're sharing this month. So a lot of our celebrations continue to be online, but that does give some great opportunity to maybe perhaps be available some events that might be difficult to join in person, but really easy to join from your computer or at home. So with that, we are going to do something new today. We generally do all of Tuesday Talks live, but in order to make sure we had the opportunity to talk to Paulette Taylor, we recorded that video. We wanted to work around her busy schedule as it's Black History Month. She has a lot going on in sharing Black history with our community and doing that excellent work. So we are going to play a video interview that Anna and I did with Ms. Taylor just last week. And at the end, we'll be able to come back and answer questions if anybody has any. So I have not had the opportunity and the pleasure of meeting Miss Paulette Taylor. She is an award-winning lifelong resident of Georgetown. She spent 31 years as an educator here in Georgetown and continues that work today, including educating me better on Black history in Georgetown. Ms. Taylor, we're so glad that you could make time for us. And you have a long-standing relationship with Ms. Taylor, and we have some great information to share as part of our Black History Month celebration for February. So Ann and Ms. Taylor, thank you for being available to us and for sharing these stories.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thank you so much, Paulette, for joining us. I've known you for many years, and it's always been an educational experience. I actually attended Carver, where you taught for many years, when I was in 2nd grade.
Oh gosh, don't tell my age.
So one of the things that you and your family have long been involved in is the Georgetown Cultural Citizens Memorial Association and the Shotgun House Museum. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about its history and its goals within the Georgetown community.
Sure. The history dates back many years. As you can see, the picture shows my aunt, who was a former president of the GCCMA, which oversees the Shotgun House. The Shotgun House was a series of other little shotgun houses, but we're glad that we retained it here and was able to preserve it. And the archives that we possess are kind of remnants of what we've gotten from families and that included inside of the Shotgun House. Families live there, and of course the history is told about a shotgun house that, you know, if you shot a gun, it would not penetrate a wall. We have a family who actually, a member of GCCMA, as a child who lived in the Shotgun House as a residence. But it dates back to the early 1900s. And we're just proud to be able to have that restored and used as a monument for the neighborhood and for the city of Georgetown.
Yes, we are very glad to have it. And so the Shotgun House was, like you mentioned, in a series of houses in what we now call the Track-Ridge-Grasshopper neighborhood, or the TRG is what the city often abbreviates it as.
Yes.
Short. But it's important to note it was kind of 3 distinct neighborhoods. And can you talk a little bit about each of those neighborhoods and its kind of boundaries?
Sure. I don't know the origin of where we got that name, Track-Ridge-Grasshopper. I lived in the Grasshopper area. Georgetown, after you cross the railroad track there at where the city hall is now located, that became those, well, 2 of the sectors. The Ridge was considered where Martin Luther King Street, former Timber Street, and that area, that small area. West Street, which was the back street, was also a part of the Ridge, which had a large percentage of minorities, both African American and Hispanic. As you move toward Belford Lumber Company, which sat on the corner of now Martin Luther King and 8th Street, you proceeded downward, you were entering Grasshopper area. That area sort of enclosed and went as far as what's now almost University Avenue. And then the track became the area that it's almost like the city council boundaries in a sense, where the District 1, I think District 1 or 2, starts at University. And it became the track because that residential area was along the railroad track. The railroad tracks went from 2nd or 3rd Street all the way to past Leander, all the way to Georgetown Railroad, which owned that after, I guess. But those areas were the secluded, segregated areas. And you knew your boundaries. If you crossed that area, it wasn't that you were reprimanded, but you knew that's when you would see colored and white water fountains, or you had to wait at the back door of a restaurant to get your hamburger. You knew that you were not in your neighborhood. So they became kind of I thought, a nickname. I don't know where the names came from, but we were teased because we lived in one area, and then they became kind of a competitive area. But that's kind of the establishment of the Track-Ridge and Grasshopper.
Okay, thank you. And so it's changed a lot over the years, and you can see kind of from this map, it's going to look different from some of the earlier maps we're going to show you in the 1916s. And one of the ways it's changed is Chautauqua Park wasn't there previously, correct? And it was kind of your family's stomping grounds, land.
You're right. Exactly. Where the Chautauqua Park is right now, the basketball court, where the basketball court is a part of 7th Street. My home place was 909 West 7th Street. However, we had 3 dwellings, houses, and my aunt had a beauty shop on that property, which extended to 6th Street. That was a 6th Street, 6th Street and 7th Street. So you're right. And then my best friend was across the street, the Jeffersons. So that was a residential area, and it's a reminder. The old mulberry tree is still there, that was in my yard, and so when the changes took place, urban renewal, then the whole dynamics of the neighborhood changed.
And another big way that the neighborhood has changed is that there are suddenly a lot more city buildings in the neighborhood as well. And I like to say that I think the history of TRG is so important, especially to the library, because it's our neighborhood.
Absolutely.
And one of the other things that is in this neighborhood now is City Hall, which is actually right behind the Shotgun House.
Yes.
And now, thanks to some efforts from Amanda Still and local artists, this is Devin Clarkson and Norma Clark, who are the artists who did this wonderful mural that sits right behind the Shotgun House, and it's trying to tell some of this story. So I kind of wanted to talk with you a little bit about this mural. If you go forward one, Britin, we can see Norma's mural. This is a community effort. People came and actually painted on this. And then Norma's mural is here. And what you might not be able to really see on it right now, but you can see a little more clearly when you look at her outline of it, which is the next slide. These are faces, these are people.
Absolutely, yes.
And then if you go to the next slide, she has identified all of these people, and you are in there, but who else is in here that we need to know as citizens of Georgetown?
Oh, wow. I see my aunt receiving an award. I see my husband holding a football. And I want to say, preface by saying, Norma just didn't throw names up there. She researched and she saw, or she tried to find some significance and some meaningful significance of why she chose certain people there to be placed. Donnell Scroggin, who was overseer of the cemetery and who was president of CMA before it became GCCMA. I'm looking at a lot of when Georgetown, when Carver had a band and cheerleaders, that was a proud moment. They were a little younger than myself. But when I see these John Oregon, who was a part of the Juneteenth, did all the cooking. When I see these names, Oh, I didn't realize Annie Johnson, my great aunt, who was a part of this document that I gave you. But I think once we get a kiosk, it's okay for, when people come to town and they look at this masterpiece. But it's more significant if we get a kiosk that tells who they are. And hopefully, and that's what Eric Lashley and I used to talk about, recordings within the shotgun house that explains and gives more of a detailed explanation.
So it's full of wonderful people. And then one thing I did want to point out, you said Norma did her research. Norma and Devin both are longtime Georgetownians.
Yeah.
So they are also from this. This is also their history here too.
Yeah. Norma's my cousin. Her dad is my mom's first, who recently passed, my mother's first cousin. And Devin Clarkson is a long time, has a history named Clarkson within the city as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so these are local artists who are really from Georgetown, producing wonderful art that helps tell Georgetown's story. And if we go on to Devin's, we have, of course, Mary Smith Bailey, wonderful educator, and then some buildings that people may not really know what they are. And we'll talk a little more in depth about these, but if you just want to talk a little bit about this, Paulette.
Sure. It's important when people kind of peruse through Georgetown or pass by and they see the face of this Black woman, they need to know who she is and what she's contributed and why she contributed. She started a kindergarten because there was no place for Black children to get that pre-education in her home, and she herself being an educator. And so we've always attributed that to her and given thanks for her contributions to our city. My sister, there's a picture of my sister's graduation class, the 5-year-olds in the shotgun house. It's highlighted with the churches. And this is one of my big pet peeves about our big churches that once existed. And I love the way Ann has showcased those, I think, in one of these frames. But I'm really, when I hear of organizations like that I don't want to say preservation and historical and landmarks, focus needs to be on a church that was built in 1869. And that was 6 years after Emancipation Proclamation. When you have a tour in Georgetown and you're showing people Georgetown, you don't pass by this church, or as I was told, we passed right by that little greenhouse, shotgun house, and no one ever pointed it out of what it was. These are historical monuments in our community. That one to the far left is Wesley, and Wesley's right now and presently is in need of painting. And yes, we're in a pandemic. They have a handful of members, and I had I mentioned this in our conversation, the former mayor, about it, and he said, "Gosh, Paulette, I saw that church. It really needs painting, but we need to follow through and not have a deaf ear or a blind eye when we see these monuments in our city, because it's a reflection of our whole city." Mm-hmm. The next one is Macedonia. These have 100 historical landmarks, 100. So any preservation group should be including these monuments in anything they do, even if it's talking about downtown, historic places, otherwise. These sit with historical landmarks on them. So this is the new building for Macedonia, and of course that's the original for Macedonia's, not Macedonia's, Wesley Chapel. I'll stop right there.
Well, we're going to talk about each one of these, or most of them, not each one of them, but on the next one, So we've got over here.
Oh, I love this. I love this. I love this picture.
This is one of the oldest photos that we have of the Ridge neighborhood. And just to get everybody oriented, I wanted to share this, and thanks to Special Collections at Southwestern for providing this resource. This is a photo taken, we think, very, very late in 1934. And what you're seeing at the very bottom is the top of the Belford Lumber Company that Miss Taylor talked about just a bit ago.
Oh,
and so we were getting lumber from right below where the airplane flew over. This is a very close shot. They must have been very, very brave when they were flying this low to take this photo. But if you look toward the top left of this photo, you can see a few things that are really important to the stories that we're telling today. You can see what was the Macedonia Baptist Church in the kind of top left corner. You can see a white building with a dark roof, and you'll see a closer up picture here in a second. You can also see the Marshall Carver School there in the background, just a little bit to the right. It looks like it's kind of at the end of that street, you can see. And then in between, we can see a lot of the homes and businesses that were part of the Ridge and kind of the very north part of the Grasshopper neighborhood. So I wanted to make sure we got a look at this. Our downtown, our courthouse square was just to the right out of this photo. And you can see in toward the top right, you can see some bridges. Those are the old bridges over the San Gabriel River. So we've got bridges there today. These are the bridges that were there before the bridges that we have now. So that's Austin Avenue headed north up toward what's now Williams Drive. But in 1934, this was kind of the north part of Georgetown with a little bit on the other side of the rivers.
Britin, may I make a comment?
Please, ma'am.
I saw this picture when Donna Josie came to my house, and we collaborated about her latest book. The white long building in the middle of this picture, and I think it's Troy Laundry.
I think that's right.
If I'm not mistaken, Troy Laundry, which is where the Williamson County Sheriff's Department, and many in walking, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's Troy Laundry. Many of the neighborhood walked. Many of the people walked. In fact, my cousin Norma's mother worked there, and I have a clothes hanger in the shotgun house that says Troy Laundry, and she ironed shirts for pardon me, a penny a piece. So we saw, because I had to walk to the school, walk home for lunch, go back to school, we would see this migration of workers going back and forth to Troy Laundry. I just wanted to capture that.
That's wonderful.
I love that.
So there's Macedonia.
There's the Macedonia Baptist Church, which we're going to show a close-up of. But one of the reasons that we want to highlight this and make sure everybody knows where it was is it's no longer with us. And so some of the things that are no longer with us that were really important landmarks in the African-American neighborhoods, we want to make sure we get a chance to highlight today. And here it is.
Oh yeah.
There it is.
That was where my baccalaureate in 1964 took place. And the 11 of us graduates had to climb those steps, march into the sanctuary through those doors up the steps.
So yes, this is Macedonia. This is a little bit closer up of what it was in like 1916. And as Britin said, it's no longer with us.
That's right.
So now you said your baccalaureate was there. What else took place? What else of other events took place in Macedonia?
Well, Macedonia was not my church at the time. I was at Friendly Will. The lower part where the door was more of a fellowship hall. Back then, Black African Americans really fellowshipped, and they had church, really big invites from other churches, but mainly the worship time took place. Everyone had to climb the steps to get into the sanctuary. but they had baccalaureate and big church meetings. A lot of the church people were more civic minded there, and that's probably why, well, I won't go into that, but Professor Marshall, before Carver became Carver, was a strong advocate for the community, he and his wife both, and that's why they were no longer hired for for positions. Their contracts were not renewed. But Macedonia, even today, Macedonia, the new Macedonia, is kind of a hub for. I remember former Dale Ross having a forum there, forums. All of our marches in the later years, and they used to stop at St. Paul, but all the marches even now congregate at Macedonia. So it's been a hub for many things in the community, old and new.
Yes, and you mentioned Wesley Chapel has been around since 1869. The congregation Macedonia has been around since 1881. And then you just mentioned St. Paul, which I think is the next slide, has been around since 1874. And this is the old St. Paul.
Yes, that's the old St. Paul. I often wondered, and I have a colored picture of St. Paul the day it was being demolished. But now, I guess in retrospect, I wondered, looking at the stone, the structure, the architectural stones, I see a similarity with those stones, the building, and Carver and the old jailhouse. I don't know if they all came from the same, what is it, the rock quarry, but they all were similar in structure, in architectural structure, with those big square stones.
For sure.
But it just gives me so much pride when I see this monument was once in my neighborhood and could be there serving, had they preserved it, could be serving another purpose, not a church.
Yeah. And you can see kind of, it's the blue square kind of towards the middle upper left. And you can see that the tracks used to go right past that. So people don't always realize that the railroad tracks went straight through pretty much downtown Georgetown.
Oh, absolutely. My kids played on those. Now, as they proceeded across the university, what's now university, where Jack in the Box, the rail apartments, and a lot of times they would park the train, the box cars. Is that what they call the box cars?
Yeah, the box cars.
They would park them in our neighborhoods. And so you had to go, you didn't have a good view. It blocked so much. And of course the kids played on the inside the box cars. It was a terrible mess. And they leave those they leave the box cars for weeks and weeks without removing them.
Wow. And then of course, one that is still standing is Wesley Chapel.
Absolutely.
And this is, like you mentioned, the congregation has been around since 1869, and this building itself has been around since 1904.
Yes, yes. And that picture, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is sad. A lot of times people didn't write down the names of people that sat in front of the church. I think you sent me a picture. There was the old congregation. I could not identify one of those people. One lady, yes, right there. I see one face that looks similar to a 90, how old is Miss Harrison? 96, 95. She's the oldest member of the church. Her house is around the corner. I see one picture that looks like her. But I don't know. If I knew the last names, then I could say this is a descendant of the Tanksleys, Gaddisons, those names that stood out more. But I have no idea. But they wore hats.
Yes, they did. And we don't even know the exact year that this was taken. So it's always helpful if you know anyone in this, if you know the year, let us know.
Yeah,
and write on your pictures, please.
Well, it'd be nice to pass this around.
Yes,
This
exactly.
photo, and there are still some descendants that might know. I'm not sure if Miss Harrison, she even might know. Point out a couple of pictures. It sure would be nice to get this and pass it to her, just to see for her.
But yes, like you mentioned, the hats. I love the dress, the coats. It's all fabulous.
Yeah, they always dressed up. There was a time we wore big hats. My mother did. My mother always wore a nice big hat to church.
And so you mentioned, and you touched on this earlier, these buildings, all of this existed just a few blocks west of the square that so many people know. And for most of Georgetown's history, the square has been predominantly owned, operated, and served the white residents of Georgetown. And even the courthouse, you said once you crossed that line, you knew there were going to be segregated water fountains. And these were the segregated water fountains at the courthouse.
Right. Right. Is that Judge Stone?
That is Judge Stone, to the right of above the white water fountain, the white only water fountain.
Okay.
And he's actually the one that in the 1960s finally got rid of the segregated fountain.
Well, I think a lot happened after 64, according to one of my recent stories. We had FBI in Georgetown. But you're absolutely right. There were two water fountains there, and then we knew our place, and we were always told by our parents, stay in your place, stay in your place, and we just were obedient to that. You knew when you went to the Palace Theater, you were going straight to the balcony. You knew not to go to the restroom downstairs. You knew if you needed to be excused to go, you exit the building and went down where Texas State Bank is, where the service station. Use the restroom, you were allowed to come back inside. You knew your place, and so you act accordingly. And your parents told you you would be safe if you did that. So we drank from the colored fountain without any hesitation. And yet in my mind, as I've told Ann, I always wondered whether colored water tasted differently from white water.
And did
rode the elevator. Of course, we went to, the joy behind that is my girlfriend and I, about 10 or 11 years old, we went to the courthouse to ride the elevator because it was the only one in town.
Now, I want to know, did the water taste any different?
Well, it didn't taste different, but emotionally it felt different.
Yeah.
Drinking from that fountain that I was forbidden to drink from.
And I don't know if you know this, Miss Taylor, but when school groups go through the courthouse on the tours with the museum, that story is told about wondering if the water tasted different.
Oh my God.
And it drives it home for the kids.
Well, it's a story. It's not, when I've spoken to Sun City book clubs in years, and I say, now, listen, this is not an apologetic story. It's my story. It's my history. And I'm just telling it. And I used to say, you don't miss what you've never had until you're aware.
Yeah.
Until you become aware that you've missed something, and then you address it.
So another thing I wanted to point out is, again, there's almost the second Georgetown, the second city, just a couple blocks off the square. There's businesses. The school is kind of that most central. This is a 1916 map, so it's a little bit different. But that segregated school is Marshall Carver is kind of the most central red box. But then we also have the International Order of the Odd Fellows and the Masonic Halls that were for the Black Masons and the Black Odd Fellows. Right. And then you have the white building counterparts on the square. So I just kind of wanted to touch about the separate kind of almost economy and civic organizations that are happening in the Track-Ridge-Georgetown or Grasshopper neighborhood. And so there's, of course, the Odd Fellows and the Masons, and then several businesses as well. And you shared this wonderful document with us, Ms. Taylor, that was from Calvary Baptist Church, 1968, and it lists some of the businesses that were over in the TRG.
Yes. And I can recall, now, some names I don't because they preceded me. But when I see Harvey Turner operated a grocery store, now they have on 8th Street, but it was, let's see, which he later relocated. Yeah, that's right. It was on 9th Street, right there where David Collision is. He also owned the house, big prominent house with white pillars directly behind the Belford Lumber Company, across the street from the Shotgun House. That was torn down. When I look at McFarland, Herb Rose Barbershop, a man who, I think he had polio or something, but that was the barbershop right there on Timber Street, across from the Justice Building. Warren Rose, his brother. The Rose family owned lots of property where monstrous, I call them monstrous houses, are being built. And my heart just bleeds because I'm wondering, you know, how did years pass and these people were I don't know, maybe the younger generation talked out of their property and just gave up their property. But some of these give me pride when I looked at tailor shops, cafes. Now, where that Bell's Bond place is on the corner of 6th and Timber was my place of dancing. That was Jerome's Cafe, and that was the #1 spot in Georgetown in the 50s and 60s. But some of these others, Ethel Moore operated beauty shop. That was my aunt who had the shop down where Chautauqua Park. Kenneth Baker, he owned a barber shop right there on 6th Street. That's as far as I can see what you have on here. But all of these were prominent buildings. And when I see rooming houses and miniature golf course on the corner.
What was that? Who had a miniature golf course?
Eddie McFarland, who is I think is a relative of, a distant relative of my pastor, Jimmy Johnson, operated a store, rooming house, and a miniature golf course on the corner of 8th and Rucker. So, and you have to understand, the streets have changed, because even right there where St. Paul, where 7th Street used to continue all the way to West Street, a lot of those streets are closed up. A lot of the houses there was no scenic drive. That was dead end street. And so all of that has changed a lot, but it just gives me a lot of pride when I look at all of these businesses that existed in the neighborhood that I wasn't aware of.
Yes, and that's kind of touching on something of, if you have things like that, please share it with GCCMA, share it with us, so we can have that history.
Absolutely. But not only in sharing it, reflecting the history, acknowledging the history, like you all are doing with your Tuesday talk. But let the community know. We don't want to harbor it and have it enclosed in the shotgun house. And that's what I used to tell Mickey, ask Miss Mickey Ross. When there's an announcement for something during the Poppy Festival, let me put one for the shotgun house so that they're inclusive. Let them know that there's another place here where historical things are presented. We just don't want to archive it and harbor it for ourselves, but we want to make it known. My one, and I'm sorry to say this. I don't mean, I'm not sorry to say it, but I don't want to be too talkative. The one thing that I've often want to do, and I'm 74 years old, I'm 75. Y'all need to edit that. I've always hoped that school buses would be able to come to the shotgun house for a field trip. And maybe some of us could be, and this is just my dream, in character. Oh, I am Mary Bailey. Oh, I am Winfred Bonner. I was the first Black city councilman in Georgetown. But I don't see us doing that without having a restroom there. Now that's another whole nother. That's been the. Well, let's get on to what you need to do. Cause I'll go down another rabbit hole. Keep going.
All right. So on the next one, this is not actually in the Track-Ridge-Grasshopper area at all, but it's important to this area. It's actually across over by Wolf Ranch off of 29, kind of back behind, if you know where Raising Cane's and Panera. It's right back behind all of that. And this is the Citizens Memorial Garden. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of this cemetery and why people should know it when they drive past?
Well, people can't know it if it's not identified.
Yeah.
When I called TxDOT and asked them, why is it when you put a sign there on 29 that this is Wolf Ranch, why couldn't there be a little sign that says Citizens Memorial Garden Cemetery? Often people come whose descendants live here, whose descendants are buried here, and they start calling, Paulette, why don't they have a sign letting us know where? It used to be a one-way in and a one-way out. You go out, you enter and exit this. And TxDOT said, well, we don't do signage. You have to see your city about that. Thanks to Kimberly Garrett and my dear friend Jill Kellum, who worked so closely with me with the when they got a little grant money, they shared it. We were able to the left of that sign, you see a map, which I have one too. We coordinate burials. Kimberly and I are on the same page. Since I've been president, probably covered up nearly 25 burials here of descendants. My dream here, I have another dream, is to coordinate. I've always wanted a citywide cleanup, including scouts and local organizations, to do a citywide cleanup here to make it look even better. The city owns the cemetery. We're just overseers. But there's always something that you have to address, a battle. And now there's a sign that says a new complex is coming, possibly a hospital or HEB or something. You know, rumors have it. We'll just have to keep abreast and our eyes open to what transpires.
And so this was actually one of the few cemeteries in Georgetown for many years where Black residents could be buried.
It was the only one. And there are a few, they said what, 1800, there are few, just a very few Hispanics. And I've often wondered, maybe they had no place to be buried and they were allowed space. There's no symmetry. You don't go down straight and make a left, right, and then you're at this one. It was just spots. And so we tried to do the best we can to keep documentation. Kimberly has photos of some of the headstones, and we've just tried to maintain. But I asked TxDOT, why was all this road? Is this just a shortcut to Walmart? Why did y'all do all of this and then put a sign up here? So it is. Y'all gonna have to edit a lot of what I say.
No. Well, we're gonna have the unedited Ms. Taylor because we appreciate so much that you help us to understand better a more complete history of Georgetown, and that you share stories that are so important for us to know and also to reflect on as we celebrate Black History Month. It was so incredible to me to learn that we have some of the oldest congregations in Williamson County. In Georgetown, we have church congregations that date back to the 1860s. And that's such a wonderful thing. It's such a wonderful legacy to have these close-knit organizations and groups in which people can gather together and form important relationships. And also, especially in the case of the Calvary Hill Baptist Church, record important elements of our history. This is a great way for us to better understand. I didn't grow up in the Grasshopper neighborhood like Ms. Taylor did, but I can see the information and the documentation that they provided about those businesses. And that gives a great platform for me to learn more and to assist in research that I do, so that I can have conversations with Ms. Taylor, so that Ann and I can look for photos and maps that help us understand that story better. It would be really helpful always if everybody had very lengthy documents and photo journals of everything that they did, so that we wouldn't have to try to piece things back together later on. But I don't keep those kind of great records always, and y'all probably don't either. So it's always kind of an adventure when we go looking toward the past and trying to understand better how we got here. But Ms. Taylor, you are a blessing to me and into our community, and have provided an incredible level of service, both in education and in serving our community, which we really value and appreciate that we had the time to spend with you, and that you were willing to be so gracious with giving your time to us. Is there anything that you want everyone to know as we close? Anything that you want people to think about as we go through February?
Yes, one thing is this year's Black History Month returns to its roots with a new focus on Black family ties. So our theme for the 2021 national theme, which we always follow, is the Black family: representation, identity, and diversity, which is exploring wide-ranging diversity of Black families, like from single to two-parent households to biracial families. And we are featuring, we're working with the Williamson County Museum to feature a represented family from this area throughout the county. And one of those families is the Miller family, who've had probably 50 family reunions. And that's one way that has become very popular because of the fall-on relationships taking place. So we wanted to acknowledge the national theme for Black History Month.
Yes. Thank you.
Any thoughts as we close our conversation with Ms. Taylor?
I just want to thank you so much for all you've done for me over the years. And how much you've helped me better understand this community.
Well, you're more than welcome. And Britt, now that I've gotten to know you, look out. You're going to be hearing from me.
I can't wait. I cannot wait.
I'm available anytime. We want to share our history and make us all grow here in Georgetown.
Make us all better historians, for sure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Hope that y'all enjoyed that conversation with Miss Taylor. It's so wonderful for us to have the opportunity to continue to learn more and continue to be better historians and be able to share that with our community. If we have any questions, please feel free to chat us or use the Q&A. If you're watching live on Facebook, you can post a comment asking a question. And while we kind of check in for questions, I just want to reiterate something that Ms. Taylor said. She talked about the 2021 theme for Black History Month, which is set by the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. That association was established in 1915. It's an organization that's over a century old. And so they set the theme for the Black family representation, identity, and diversity. And if you'd like to learn more about that, they have a lot of online resources that you can view if you would like to check out more. So now, do we have any questions that we can answer for folks as we wrap up our presentation?
Only question we got in on Facebook was about the height of both the churches and whether or not that was for cooling purposes and for Macedonia and the other church in the TRG.
So that's a really good question. I'm not sure because that's not a building most of these I haven't been able to see in person. I haven't been in Georgetown long enough. And so, Ann, if you know, you're welcome to join in. Something that we do know about these churches that I think is really interesting for Georgetown, you might be familiar with Charles Belford and the Belford Lumber Company. We talked about the Belford Lumber Company a little bit. They were right next to the Track-Ridge and Grasshopper neighborhood area. So the rail spur ran right into the lumber yard. It's where we've got essentially city parking lots now and across from the library. So in some of the research that we did to prepare for this presentation, we discovered that the Belford Lumber Company provided the materials for many of the churches in the TRG neighborhood. And so specifically, they provided materials for the Macedonia Baptist Church in 1913. They provided materials for St. Paul Church in 1914 and for Friendly Will Baptist Church in 1937. Belford Lumber is assumed to have probably provided the materials for the Wesley Chapel AME Church, but we don't have the same kind of documentation for that, so we're not sure. It seems very likely, but I can't confirm at this point. And so when we talk about a history of segregated spaces and segregated businesses, sometimes that's not the complete history. There were business transactions between white businesses and Black churches and Black organizations, Black individuals and families, but sometimes those business transactions look different. So one of the stories that Ms. Taylor has told us is that sometimes if you were a Black person, you would have to go to the back door of an establishment in order to receive goods or services rather than being able to go into the front door. And so we thought it was important, though, that to highlight the Belford Lumber Company played such a key role in Georgetown structures. And the owner, Charles Belford, has a whole National Register Historic District named after him because he was such a prominent builder. And so we thought it was important to highlight that relationship, that he supplied also a lot of the materials for the churches that you saw in our presentation today. So Nat, do we have any other questions that we can answer for folks?
I think that's it. Great.
Well, Ann, anything to close West with?
So yes, I did see one other from Chris Thompson. Remind us of the location of Macedonia. It's basically where it is today, which is essentially at 3rd and MLK. At that time, it would have been timber, but the previous building that did have the more height to it, as Britin said, neither of us have been around long enough to have seen that one in person. But from the photographic evidence, it does look like it's kind of those typical features of older buildings where it was for cooling purposes. It had windows up at the top that could probably be used to vent and things like that. But yes, thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much, Paulette, and be sure to check out all of the good things that GCCMA has going on this month and register for those read-alongs and discussions.
And so as you go through February, just keep Black history in mind and look for ways to learn more about that. And then please join us next month, the first Tuesday of the month. We'll be back with a new topic for you.